The Franklin County courtroom fell into a hushed, anticipatory silence as 17-year-old Marcus Chen was led through the heavy oak doors, his wrists bound in chrome handcuffs that caught the fluorescent light. His face, angular and sharp for his age, wore an expression that sent a chill through everyone present, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk that seemed to mock the very concept of justice itself. He had spent the last 3 months treating his murder trial like a performance, convinced that his youth, his charm, and most importantly, his carefully constructed web of lies would be enough to escape the consequences of what he had done. He had killed a man in cold blood, and yet he walked into that sentencing hearing as if he were attending a school assembly where the worst outcome would be a detention. But what Marcus Chen did not know, what he could not have anticipated in his narcissistic certainty, was that the person he trusted most in the world was about to stand up and destroy him with the truth. The victim's name was Thomas Reynolds, a 43-year-old small business owner who had built his life around 2 simple principles: hard work and kindness to his neighbors. He owned a modest electronics repair shop on the corner of Maple and 5th Street in suburban Portland, Oregon, a place that had become something of a community landmark over the 15 years of its existence. Thomas was the kind of man who would stay late to fix a teenager's broken laptop before prom, who would waive the fee for elderly customers on fixed incomes, who remembered the names of his regulars and asked about their families. He had never married, channeling all his paternal instincts into mentoring young people in the neighborhood, offering them part-time jobs, teaching them about circuits and soldering, about responsibility and showing up on time. His shop was more than a business. It was a refuge, a place where lost kids could find direction and purpose. On the evening of March 14th, as the spring rain drummed steadily against the shop's windows, Thomas Reynolds was preparing to close for the night. The street outside was empty, the sidewalk slick and reflective under the amber glow of streetlights. He was alone, counting the day's modest earnings and filing away repair tickets, unaware that his simple act of kindness months earlier was about to cost him everything. He had no warning, no moment of premonition, no chance to call for help. The attack came suddenly and with brutal efficiency, transforming his sanctuary into a crime scene that would haunt the first responders for years to come. Marcus Chen had been one of those kids Thomas had tried to help. Intelligent, articulate, and seemingly polite, Marcus had walked into the shop 8 months earlier asking about a summer job. Thomas, always willing to give a young person a chance, had hired him on the spot. For 3 months, Marcus worked at the shop, learning the trade, earning Thomas's trust, and all the while, observing. He noted when Thomas made bank deposits, where he kept the safe key, how the security system worked, and most importantly, when he was most vulnerable. Marcus was not a troubled kid crying out for help. He was a predator conducting reconnaissance, and Thomas Reynolds, in his fundamental decency, never saw it coming. The 911 call came at 8:47 p.m. from a neighboring business owner who had noticed the shop's lights still on well past closing time and saw what appeared to be overturned furniture through the window. Police arrived within minutes to find the front door locked, but the back entrance slightly ajar, swinging gently in the rain-soaked wind. Inside, they discovered Thomas Reynolds lying in a pool of blood behind the counter, his life extinguished by multiple stab wounds. The cash register was empty, the safe had been opened and cleaned out, and the security camera system had been deliberately disabled. It appeared at first glance to be a robbery gone tragically wrong, a senseless act of violence in pursuit of money. But Detective Sarah Morrison, a 20-year veteran of the Portland Police Department, saw something that troubled her immediately. The crime scene was too clean, too organized for a panicked robbery. Whoever had done this knew the shop's layout intimately, knew where the cameras were, knew how to disable them, and knew exactly what they were looking for. This was not the work of a desperate stranger. This was personal, planned, and executed by someone Thomas had trusted enough to let inside.
The investigation began with Thomas's employee records. Marcus Chen's name surfaced immediately. He had worked at the shop during the summer, had been let go in September for what Thomas had diplomatically described in his notes as reliability issues, though friends later revealed that Thomas had caught Marcus stealing small amounts of cash from the register. Thomas, ever the optimist, had not pressed charges, hoping the boy would learn from the mistake. It was an act of mercy that would prove to be his final, fatal error in judgment. Detectives descended on Marcus's suburban home at dawn, a modest split level in a quiet neighborhood where such things simply did not happen. His parents, both professionals, utterly blindsided by the accusations, stood in their doorway in bathrobes, their faces masks of incomprehension as officers presented the search warrant. Marcus was found in his bedroom asleep, his phone clutched in his hand, seemingly without a care in the world. When the officers entered his room, he looked up with that same faint smirk, as if this were all an amusing inconvenience that would be cleared up by lunchtime. But the evidence told a different story. Hidden in a backpack at the back of his closet were Thomas Reynolds' wallet, still containing his driver's license and credit cards, and nearly $4,000 in cash, the exact amount missing from the shop's safe. A black jacket found stuffed under his bed tested positive for the victim's blood. Most damning of all, police discovered the murder weapon, a hunting knife with a serrated edge wrapped in a towel and buried in a plastic bag in the family's recycling bin. The blade was a perfect match for the wounds documented in the autopsy report. During the initial interrogation, Marcus maintained an aura of calm detachment that unnerved even the seasoned detectives. He invoked his right to an attorney immediately, but not before offering a carefully prepared statement, claiming he had been at home all evening with his best friend, Tyler Morrison. The alibi was delivered with smooth confidence, and Marcus seemed genuinely certain it would hold. After all, Tyler was not just his best friend. They had been inseparable since middle school, brothers in everything but blood, bound by years of shared secrets and unwavering loyalty. Marcus had no doubt that Tyler would back his story, that their friendship was stronger than any police pressure. Tyler Morrison was brought in for questioning the following day. At 16 years old, he was a quiet, introspective kid, the son of Detective Sarah Morrison, who had recused herself from directly interviewing him to avoid any appearance of conflict. Tyler sat in the interview room, his hands trembling slightly as he faced two detectives he had known his entire life as his mother's colleagues. They asked him a simple question. Was Marcus Chen with him on the night of March 14th? Tyler hesitated. In that moment of silence, the entire case hung in the balance. He could lie, protect his best friend, honor the loyalty they had built over years of friendship, or he could tell the truth and destroy the person he had once considered a brother. The detectives watched him carefully, saying nothing, letting the weight of the questions settle over him like a heavy fog. Finally, Tyler took a shaking breath and spoke words that would change everything. Marcus Chen had not been with him that night. In fact, Marcus had asked him days earlier to lie if anyone ever questioned his whereabouts. And there was more. Tyler, his voice barely above a whisper, began to recount conversations he had had with Marcus in the weeks leading up to the murder. Marcus had talked about the shop, about how much money Thomas kept in the safe, about how easy it would be to rob the place if someone knew the layout. Tyler thought it was just talk, the kind of edgy, rebellious fantasizing teenagers sometimes engaged in to feel dangerous. He never imagined Marcus would actually do it. But now, sitting in that sterile room under the fluorescent lights, the terrible truth crashed over him like a wave. His best friend was a killer, and he had tried to make Tyler an accomplice after the fact. The confession was recorded, documented, and verified. Tyler's testimony became the cornerstone of the prosecution's case, transforming what might have been a circumstantial evidence puzzle into an ironclad narrative of premeditated murder. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Walsh, built their case methodically. They had the physical evidence, the financial motive, and now the testimony of Marcus's own best friend detailing his consciousness of guilt and his attempts to construct an alibi. Marcus was charged as an adult with first-degree murder, robbery, and tampering with evidence. His parents, devastated and in complete denial, hired the best defense attorney their life savings could afford, Michael Brennan, a skilled litigator known for his ability to humanize young defendants. Brennan's strategy was clear from the outset. Acknowledge that Marcus had made a terrible mistake, but frame it as the impulsive act of an immature teenager, not the calculated murder of a cold-blooded killer. He would argue for manslaughter, for leniency, for a chance at rehabilitation in the juvenile system. But Marcus himself remained his own worst enemy. Throughout the pretrial hearings, he maintained that insufferable smirk, that air of superiority that suggested he was playing a game only he understood. He whispered to his attorney during victim impact statements, rolled his eyes at witness testimony, and stared at the jury with an unsettling intensity that seemed more predatory than remorseful. His parents pleaded with him to show emotion, to demonstrate some understanding of the gravity of what he had done, but Marcus seemed fundamentally incapable of grasping that the world did not revolve around his desires. The trial lasted 3 weeks, a grueling procession of forensic experts, character witnesses, and emotional testimony from Thomas Reynolds' family and friends. The prosecution painted a picture of a young man who had betrayed the trust of a mentor, who had planned and executed a murder with chilling premeditation, all for a few $1,000s. The defense countered with psychologists who spoke of adolescent brain development, of Marcus's troubled relationship with his demanding parents, of the impulsivity of youth. But every argument was undermined by Marcus's own demeanor in the courtroom, his visible contempt for the process, his complete inability to project even a facade of remorse. The jury deliberated for just under 2 days before returning with their verdict, guilty on all counts. Marcus's smirk finally faltered for just a moment when the word guilty echoed through the courtroom, but it returned almost immediately, as if he was already calculating his next move, already planning his appeal, still convinced that somehow, some way, his intelligence would save him. 2 weeks later, the courtroom reconvened for sentencing. This was the moment when the judge would decide Marcus's fate, would determine whether the 17-year-old would spend the rest of his life in prison or whether there was any possibility of mercy. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with reporters, curious onlookers, and the grieving friends and family of Thomas Reynolds. Marcus entered with that same casual confidence, that same faint smirk, dressed in a suit his parents had bought him for him, playing the part of the remorseful young man, even as his eyes betrayed his true feelings. The victim impact statements came first, a procession of Thomas Reynolds' loved ones who stood before the court to speak of their loss. His sister spoke of the brother she would never see again, of the nephew her children would never know. Former employees, kids Thomas had mentored, spoke tearfully of the man who had believed in them when no one else did. Each statement was a dagger, a reminder of the profound human cost of Marcus's actions. And through it all, Marcus sat unmoved, his face a mask of boredom, occasionally glancing at his watch as if he had somewhere more important to be. Judge Robert Harrison, a stern man in his 60s with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much human cruelty, watched Marcus carefully. He had presided over hundreds of sentencing hearings, but something about this young man's complete lack of empathy disturbed him deeply. Before delivering his sentence, the judge asked if there were any final statements from witnesses. The prosecution indicated they had one more witness, a rebuttal to the defense's plea for leniency. The courtroom doors opened and Tyler Morrison walked in. The change in Marcus's demeanor was instantaneous and shocking. The smirk vanished, replaced by a look of pure, undiluted rage. His eyes widened, his jaw clenched, and for the first time in the entire trial, genuine emotion flooded his face. It was not remorse or sorrow, it was rage. The rage of someone who had just realized they had been betrayed by the one person they thought they controlled. Tyler walked to the witness stand with slow, deliberate steps, his face pale but resolute. He had already given his testimony during the trial, had already told the police everything he knew, but this was different. This was personal. The prosecutor, understanding the significance of the moment, approached gently, giving Tyler the space to speak in his own words. "Tyler," Jennifer Walsh began softly, "you've known the defendant for how long?" "Since we were 12, 5 years. He was my best friend, my only real friend, honestly." "And during those 5 years, did you ever see signs of the person he would become?"
Tyler was silent for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "I saw signs," he finally said, "but I didn't want to believe them. Marcus was always different. He was smarter than everyone, and he made sure you knew it. He manipulated people, me included. He would test boundaries, push limits, see what he could get away with. I thought it was just teenage rebellion. I thought he would grow out of it." "What changed your mind?" "When he asked me to lie for him." Tyler's voice grew stronger, more certain. "Days after Mr. Reynolds was killed, before anyone even knew Marcus was involved, he called me and told me that if anyone asked, he had been at my house that night. He didn't ask, he told me, like it was a given that I would do it. And when I asked him why, he just laughed and said it was insurance. I didn't understand what he meant until the police came to my door." Jennifer Walsh let the silence stretch, allowing the jury and the judge to absorb the weight of Tyler's words. "Tyler, the defense has argued that Marcus is a troubled young man who made a terrible mistake in a moment of impulse. Based on your 5 years of friendship with him, do you believe that to be true?" Tyler turned and looked directly at Marcus for the first time since entering the courtroom. Marcus stared back, his face contorted with hatred, his eyes burning with a rage that was almost palpable. But Tyler did not look away. "No," Tyler said, his voice clear and unwavering. "Marcus didn't make a mistake. He planned this. He told me weeks before it happened that he was going to rob Mr. Reynolds. I thought he was joking. I thought it was just talk. But he wasn't joking. He was testing me, seeing if I would stop him, seeing if I was loyal enough to keep his secrets. And when I didn't take him seriously, he took that as permission." The courtroom was utterly silent. Even the bailiffs, normally stoic and unmoved, watched with rapt attention. "Marcus doesn't feel bad about what he did," Tyler continued, his voice now thick with emotion. "He feels bad that he got caught. He's sitting there right now hating me for telling the truth, but he's not thinking about Mr. Reynolds. He's not thinking about the family he destroyed. He's only thinking about himself, about how he's the victim, about how unfair it is that his plan didn't work. That's who he is. That's who he's always been." Jennifer Walsh nodded slowly. "Thank you, Tyler. I know this wasn't easy." "It's the easiest thing I've ever done," Tyler said quietly, "because Mr. Reynolds was a good man. He deserved better than this. He deserved better than Marcus." As Tyler stepped down from the witness stand, Marcus exploded. He lunged forward in his seat, his hand slamming on the defense table, his voice a raw, guttural scream. "You traitor! You lying piece of—" The bailiffs were on him in seconds, restraining him, but the damage was done. The mask had finally, completely shattered. The jury, the judge, the courtroom full of spectators all saw the real Marcus Chen, the monster beneath the smirk, the rage and entitlement that had been lurking just below the surface all along. Judge Harrison slammed his gavel repeatedly, calling for order, his face a thundercloud of barely contained fury. "Mr. Chen, you will control yourself or you will be removed from this courtroom. Do you understand?" Marcus, breathing heavily, his face flushed, slowly nodded. The bailiffs released him but remained close, their hands resting warily near their restraints. He sat back down, but the composure was gone, replaced by a cold, seething hatred that radiated from him like heat. Judge Harrison waited until the courtroom had settled into tense silence before speaking. His voice, when it came, was low and filled with a righteous anger that seemed to fill every corner of the room. "Marcus Chen, I have been on this bench for 23 years. I have sentenced murderers, rapists, and every variety of human monster you can imagine. But rarely have I encountered someone as young as you who displays such a complete and utter absence of humanity.
You murdered a man who showed you nothing but kindness. You planned it, you executed it, and you have shown not one moment of genuine remorse." Marcus stared at the judge, his jaw tight, his eyes defiant. "Your attorney has argued eloquently for leniency, citing your age, your potential for rehabilitation. But I have watched you throughout this trial. I have seen you smirk at the victim's family. I have seen you treat these proceedings as if they were beneath you. And now I have watched you attack the one person brave enough to tell the truth about who you really are." The judge paused, letting his words sink in. "Your best friend just stood in this courtroom and told us that you are not a troubled kid who made a mistake. You are a calculating predator who got caught, and I believe him." Marcus's face went pale. For the first time, genuine fear flickered in his eyes. "Therefore," Judge Harrison continued, his voice ringing with finality, "this is the judgment of this court, that you be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. You will spend the rest of your days behind bars, and you will have a lifetime to contemplate the life you stole, and the future you threw away for $4,000 and your own arrogance." The courtroom erupted in a mixture of gasps, sobs, and murmurs. Marcus sat frozen, his face slack with shock. The reality of the words finally brutally penetrated his delusion. Life without parole. No appeals would change that. No charm, no manipulation, no lies would save him now. The game was over, and he had lost everything. As the bailiffs moved in to take him away, Marcus turned one final time to look at Tyler, who stood at the back of the courtroom with his mother's hand on his shoulder. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and in that exchange was the death of a friendship, the end of a loyalty that had been built on lies and sustained by fear. Tyler did not look away. He had done the hardest thing a person can do. He had told the truth, even when it cost him everything. Marcus Chen was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, his head down, the smirk finally, permanently gone from his face. The doors closed behind him with a heavy, final thud. And Thomas Reynolds' family embraced, their tears a mixture of grief and relief. Justice had been served, not by the system alone, but by the courage of a 16-year-old boy who chose truth over loyalty, who understood that some bonds are not worth keeping when they are forged in blood and sustained by silence. In the aftermath, Tyler Morrison would struggle with his decision, haunted by the memory of the friend he had once known, the boy who had existed before the monster emerged. But he would also find peace in knowing that he had done the right thing, that his testimony had given Thomas Reynolds' family the closure they deserved. The weight of that choice would stay with him forever, a burden he would carry into adulthood, a reminder that sometimes the hardest act of courage is not standing by your friends, but standing up to them when they become something unforgivable. And Marcus Chen would indeed spend the rest of his life in prison, the smirk replaced by the hollow stare of a man who finally, too late, understood that he was not as untouchable as he believed.